everyone, I'm Khujasta Ahmadi and my group members are Abdul, Mateen, Rahmat and Emal Ismail, and for our final group project for web development, we chose to do a real estate website, which is basically the buying and selling of houses online. So customers can either rent or buy houses. So let's see how this website looks like. This is the homepage. There's a little information about what we stand for, and then a little glimpse of the properties that we have to offer, and then furthermore there's the about page, which tells you about our company, what we stand for, what our purpose is, and what we aim to do. And then this just goes on to show why we're fit for the job, and what is our professional background that makes us fit and suitable for helping you get to your dream home. So this is the properties page, which can be accessed from the home page as well if you just click onto this button of more properties. So we have a variety of properties to offer, which vary for rent or for sale. Depending on the user's needs, they can go for whatever they like. So when you click on the for sale button, it takes you onto a page that shows the interior of that home and a detailed description of how many rooms it has to offer, and then description of when it was made and what kind of construction and everything, and then the price for it, and then the location. So you close the deal, you give your name, you give your last name, and then your email address and country, and you continue, and then here your purchase has been done, and it shows you the information of that purchase or transaction. Moving on, this is the team, as I mentioned before, and then you can directly contact our team by reaching out to our email. And finally, this is the contacts page. So you can enter your name, your email, your subject, maybe whatever query you have, for example problem, and then you can enter your message here and press this button to send us your message, and this just gives information of what time we're available or not. So let's see how login or signing up works. So when you come here on the sign up page, you can either, if you're a revisiting user, you can just log in with your email and password and log in, or if you're a new member, you can sign up. So let's just sign up. Your last name, email, and then you can give it a password and any phone number you wish, and then you sign up, and it successfully signs you up. So if you have to look at the database, now my name is entered here. So let's see how the code works here for sign up. So basically, in the sign up form, the form is the button of sign up, the name is submit. So in the code, since the form is post, the method of form is post, so it sees that if is set post submit, which means that if this button is clicked with the value or name of submit, then get all the variables inputs of the user and save them to variables, and then select from members where member email is equal to. So this is just to check if the user is a returning user or if any user with the similar name exists in the database. So if it does, if it checks if any row matches, if any row, which is more than 0, if any row matches, then it shows the message that user exists. Else it enters into the database those values, and then if the values or if the insertion is done successfully, then it creates cookies for that email and password. So for that user, it creates cookies which expires after this much time, and then it shows the message. So it uses JavaScript, it embeds JavaScript here, JavaScript alert message to show the message which is successfully signed up, and then it takes the user to the index page. So as we saw now, and then you can also, if you're a returning user, you can simply log in So let's see the cookies. So as you can see, there are no cookies here, but as soon as I sign in, cookies are created. And then as soon as I log out, the cookies get expired. So let's have a look into the code of how this works. So first, when we signed in, let's see how that works. So basically it says that if is set submit, which is how the sign up page works, is set submit, come and select from members, and then select and with the post method get the email and password, and if it matches with any email in the database and password in the database, but if these both conditions are satisfied, then fetch the name, first name and last name for that specific email and password, and display a welcome message and set cookies for that user again, and then embed JavaScript here, which shows an alert message and takes the user to the index page. And if credentials are invalid, so just like here, it shows a session message of invalid credentials. So this is embedded into the form. As soon as the credentials are invalid, the message gets embedded here as an alert error. So for example, if I were to log in with a wrong password, it would just show invalid credentials here. So let's see how logout works. So if I'm not logged in, as soon as I log in, the logout button shows. The login button is not there anymore. So in every page we have embedded this code, which is if is set cookie and email. So if the user is signed in and signed up, cookies are created. Now this check if cookies are still not expired, then show the logout button, and if there are no cookies, then show the login button, which is how we determine which button to show. So if logout is pressed, then take the user to the sign in page and set logout to true, which is an embedded PHP function. And then in sign in page, what it does is that if is set logout, which is the forms method, is get right here. The method of the form is get, so it checks that if is set logout, if is set logout, then just expire the cookies. So how we expire cookies is we give them a name, we give them a null value, and then we set the time to expired 1 hour ago, which is what expires it, and then we give a specific path for the cookie and the domain, which is localhost. So we expire both the email and password cookies, so the user is logged out, just to show that the user is logged out. So that's about it for the user part of it. Now let's move on to the admin.
We also have the admin user, which has a degree of control over the users that log into the system. So right here we have these two users. We can add another user with a different ID. Give it a phone number, give it a password, and then we can add it, and it gets added. Then if you want to update an existing user, let's say we want to update its email, so we just say email.com, and then update its phone, and then maybe its password. So if you press update now for user 1, it all gets changed. Now if you want to delete a user, we can simply enter their ID. Let's say we want to delete user 1 or user 3, so we just enter their ID and we delete the user. So that's how it works. The admin can access other pages as well, for example the contents page. And let's see how the code works here. So for the code of the admin, we have the PHP code. We have the overall design, which is just a series of also we have the login and logout here as well. Then we have all these input places for the email name, ID, password, and then we have 3 specific buttons of add, update, and delete. So and then we have that's about it. And we also have a class, a table right here, which gets replaced with which data gets added into. Then we page connection file. So action string, this basically works in conjunction with the jQuery page. So these codes work interrelatedly with one another. So let's just see how this code works, and then I'll explain the first line of action string when we move on to the jQuery page. So if I set post action string, and so an action string is update record. So we set update record, then get all these from post method from the form, and then query is update members, and then set member, set first name, last name, email, phone, and pass for member ID. So it updates based on the member ID, and then if query is successful, it should print true, and if it's not, then it should just show false. And then for delete record, we say we get the ID. So since we delete based on ID, we say delete for members where ID is equal, member ID is equal to ID that we get from the post method of the form. If it's successful, then true. If it's not, then false. Moving on to a load record. So in the load and display really work with one another. So first it says select for members where member ID is ID, and then it fetches it, and then it returns all the rows with that ID. So it returns the member ID for that ID, and then it returns all the data. And for display method, what we're basically doing here is that we are selecting everything from members, and then we are putting it into these specific column tags. Specific column tags in a row. So it will return the member ID along with the member name, last name, email, number, their phone number, and that's their password. And then it will echo all this. So it takes all this as a string first, returns it, and then it displays it with the echo function. And then for insert, we're basically taking all this from the post method and we're inserting it into the page. So what Ajax really does is that it loads, it doesn't really need reloading the page to display any changes that have been made. So right here, this is the clear border and clear text. So these are just every time a method happens or an action happens, it just clears it. So for update, for example, it just first it takes the so if it checks for every record. If it's like blank, then it outlines the text box itself with red for everyone, for first name, last name here, for last name and everything, and then it just shows it as red if it's null. And else it just takes the code from the users.php and it takes the form ID from here. You can see takes the form ID, and then the action string is set to update record. So when action string here is set to update record, it goes to the PHP page and checks what the action string is, and then it does it according to that, which I explained already. And if it's success, then the response is true, and then it displays. So update, it calls the display function after every action. Then if it's delete, then it goes to the users.php and then sets the action string to delete record, which comes here and right here, and it deletes based on ID. And then if it's true, then it displays it, and then it clears all the text that was already in those text boxes. And then this is the display function, which is called every time. So this is just to show on quick when we select something from the table how the color changes. So for example, it takes everything from the document and it just returns it. And then it sets the action string to load record. And the display function in jQuery simply just calls the load record function in PHP right here. It loads all the records as I explained before. And then it loads it and then it displays it. So and then the display function sets the action string to display, and then it displays it right here in table format. And then the last one is insert or add, and then the admin must enter all fields for the form to insert any values. So it goes to PHP and sets the action string to insert, and then the rest of the job is done by PHP. So thank you very much. That was it for our project.
So for the admin, this is how the code works. This is the overall design, which has input text field areas for first name, last name, email, password, and then it has 3 buttons, which is add, update, and delete. Then this is the main body of the form, which is a table, and then this is the table headings by which the order the data is displayed. So there's nothing much here, and then we have the login and logout functions here as well. And then the main code which happens here, let's just go first to Ajax, and then we'll move on to PHP. So to begin with, Ajax has a few functions, for example, clear border and clear text. So it just goes on to clear the text that has been already entered or after an action is done. So for update, for example, it checks that if all these are not empty, if it's not null, if it's null, then set the border to red, all of them, which works in else if ways, and then if else, it accesses the user's one.php, it gives this data to the form ID, and it sets the action string to update record. So for update record here, right here in the PHP, we have this function which takes all these values from post method and assigns them to PHP variables and queries them. So since we're updating based on ID, it sets member name in the database to fname, which we get from the admin, where ID is equals to ID. So, and then if the query is successful, it's true. If it's not, then it's false. So same as goes for the delete function, which is done on based on delete as well. So it sets the action string to delete, and we only need the ID for delete. So it fetches it to the user1.php, and then in delete record we just take the ID from the post method, assign it to ID PHP variable, and then delete from members. Remember members ID is, so it just recognizes based on ID and it deletes it, and then it shows if it's successful or not. Moving on, we have a display function here. So what this basically does is that it fetches the load record function. It sets the action string to load record, and then it goes on to the PHP page, which is load record. So we can see it selects from loads everything where the ID is where ID is whatever the user entered, and then in the main body of the table, which is ID and first name, last name, and everything. It fetches these values in array and it returns it. So it takes all these values in array, so it takes accesses member ID from the database and assigns it to ID. And so what this function does is that it loads all the data to all the assigned or all the variables of Ajax of jQuery. It loads all those, and then the display function shows it to the user or the admin. So it sets the action string to display, and then it uses the ID of the table to display the data. So it uses the ID of the table, and then it shows an HTML response. So how it looks like in this is that it encodes in HTML all the columns in a row for member ID, member first name, last name, everything from the database. It fetches it, and then it echoes it. So this fetches it, and then this just shows to the user. And finally, for the add one, it checks if all these are null, display red, else if it's not null, set the action string to insert, and these are the variables we will use. And after that, when the action is done, display and then clear the text boxes. So let's see how the insert works here. In insert, we just have variables of PHP that get the post inputs of user through post method, and then it inserts it into members with these values, and then it equals true if successful and false if not. So that's about it for this project. That concludes it. Thank you very much for listening.